The Trail of Tears was a tragic forced relocation of numerous indigenous tribes from their native lands in the southeastern United States to designated territory in Oklahoma. This harrowing journey led to the deaths of over 4,000 Native Americans due to harsh conditions, lack of resources, and brutal treatment. These indigenous communities, including the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole, faced relentless challenges during their trek. The Indian Removal Act, signed by President Andrew Jackson in 1830, provided legal grounds for this displacement, although it did not explicitly authorize forced removal. Despite widespread opposition from Christian missionaries and some members of Congress, the act was passed after extensive debates. The ultimate goal of the act was to open up these lands for settlement by white Americans, who were eager to expand into the fertile regions occupied by native tribes. The journey itself was grueling and dehumanizing. Everyday life on the Trail of Tears was marked by severe suffering. The indigenous travelers faced cold, hunger, and exhaustion, often having to walk barefoot across freezing landscapes. The limited availability of food, shelter, and medical care made survival incredibly difficult, and many fell victim to starvation and disease. The harsh winter weather added to their misery, as families struggled to keep warm with only the thinnest of blankets. The elderly and children were particularly vulnerable, and the death toll grew as they continued on their journey. Despite being promised fair treatment, indigenous peoples were frequently forced to detour away from towns or pay extortionate fees to cross private lands, all while enduring harsh weather conditions. In one instance, crossing the Ohio River, Cherokee travelers were charged exorbitant ferry fees, much higher than other passengers. Many were left with no choice but to pay or face even more dangerous routes. The suffering did not end there. Adding to the hardships, enslaved African Americans, owned by some of the tribes, were also brought along, tasked with performing laborious duties during the trek. These individuals, in addition to facing the same unforgiving conditions, had to care for their Cherokee masters. They hunted for food, tended to the sick, and carried heavy loads, all while enduring the same physical and emotional tolls as everyone else. The relocation also took an emotional toll on Native Americans as they faced hostility from settlers along the way, with little sympathy or assistance offered. Spectators often watched the long lines of indigenous people in silence, offering neither help nor compassion, and many Native Americans felt deep resentment toward those who observed their suffering with indifference. The forced march covered a distance of roughly 1,000 miles, and it took the Cherokee nearly 4 months to complete. The journey was supposed to take only a couple of months, but due to poor planning, harsh weather, and limited resources, it stretched on much longer. Many of those forced to relocate were denied even basic comforts like adequate food and shoes. They traveled through rough terrain, crossing rivers, mountains, and forests, all while enduring extreme weather conditions. Along the way, the sick and dying were often left by the roadside, buried in shallow graves without proper ceremonies. The combination of starvation, exposure, and exhaustion led to the deaths of thousands, turning the Trail of Tears into a devastating chapter in American history. The emotional and psychological toll on the indigenous people cannot be understated. Families were torn apart, and communities that had thrived for generations were dismantled. The Cherokee, for example, had established a sophisticated society with a written constitution, a newspaper, and a system of governance. The forced removal shattered this way of life, leading to profound cultural loss. Children, who had once been part of tight-knit communities, lost not only their homes, but also their connection to their heritage. The trauma of the Trail of Tears was passed down through generations, and the scars left by this event continue to impact Native American communities today. The loss of ancestral land also meant the loss of spiritual connections, as many sacred sites were left behind, further deepening the cultural devastation experienced by these tribes. In resistance to this oppressive relocation policy, the Seminole tribe chose to fight rather than leave Florida. The Seminole Wars against the U.S. Army lasted until 1842, costing the American government millions of dollars and resulting in heavy casualties. The resistance by the Seminoles showed the resilience and determination of indigenous people to protect their lands and way of life, despite overwhelming odds. Ultimately, despite pockets of resistance, thousands of indigenous people were removed, their communities dismantled, and their lands overtaken, making the Trail of Tears one of the most tragic episodes in American history. By the 1840s, tens of thousands of Native Americans had been forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands in the Southeast to their new home across the Mississippi River, which was known as Indian Territory. This forced relocation had long-lasting consequences. The promises made by the U.S. government that the new territory would remain untouched by settlers were soon broken as more and more Americans pushed westward. The Indian Territory grew smaller over the years as white settlers encroached on the land, and by 1907, the area that had once been a promised home for indigenous people became part of the state of Oklahoma. The Trail of Tears is remembered not only for the immense suffering and loss experienced by those who endured it, but also as a symbol of the broken promises and injustices faced by Native Americans throughout U.S. history. Today, the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail serves as a reminder of this dark chapter, preserving the memory of those who suffered and died during this tragic relocation. The Trail of Tears was not just a physical journey, but also a profound test of endurance, faith, and resilience. Despite the unimaginable hardships, the Cherokee and other tribes demonstrated remarkable strength in the face of overwhelming adversity. Oral histories from descendants of those who walked the Trail of Tears recount stories of survival, solidarity, and the determination to rebuild. The resilience of these tribes is evident today, as many indigenous communities have managed to preserve their cultural traditions, languages, and sense of identity despite centuries of oppression. The endurance of these cultural practices stands as a testament to the spirit of those who endured the Trail of Tears. The impact of the Trail of Tears also influenced American policies and attitudes toward indigenous people for generations. The U.S. government's treatment of Native Americans set a precedent for future actions that continued to marginalize and oppress indigenous communities. The loss of land, autonomy, and cultural heritage was compounded by subsequent policies, such as the establishment of reservations and the implementation of assimilation programs aimed at erasing indigenous identities. These policies contributed to a cycle of poverty, disenfranchisement, and social challenges that many Native American communities continue to face today. The legacy of the Trail of Tears serves as a critical reminder of the importance of acknowledging historical injustices and striving for reconciliation and healing. In modern times, efforts have been made to honor the memory of those who suffered during the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, which stretches across 9 states, allows people to trace parts of the route taken by the Cherokee and other tribes. It serves as an educational resource, helping to raise awareness about the history of Native American displacement and the resilience of indigenous peoples. Commemorative events, memorials, and educational programs have also been established to ensure that the story of the Trail of Tears is not forgotten. These initiatives aim to foster a deeper understanding of the struggles faced by Native Americans and to promote respect for their enduring cultural contributions. The Trail of Tears is a powerful symbol of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of profound suffering. It is a story of loss, but also of survival and determination. The Cherokee, Seminole, Creek, Chickasaw, and other tribes who endured this forced march demonstrated a remarkable capacity to endure and adapt. Despite the efforts to erase their presence and culture, these tribes have persisted, and their stories continue to be told. The Trail of Tears is not just a tragic event in American history, it is a testament to the strength and resilience of indigenous peoples, whose legacy continues to shape the cultural fabric of the United States. The Trail of Tears also had significant economic repercussions for Native American communities. The loss of fertile land and natural resources devastated the economic foundation of these tribes. Many indigenous groups had developed thriving agricultural economies and trade networks before their forced relocation. The displacement disrupted these economies, leaving communities without the means to sustain themselves. The new lands in Oklahoma were often less fertile and unsuitable for the type of agriculture they had previously practiced. The sudden loss of economic stability forced many Native Americans into dependency on government aid, which was often insufficient and inconsistently provided. The cycle of poverty that began with the Trail of Tears continued for many years, as economic opportunities for Native Americans remained limited in the new territories. Socially, the Trail of Tears led to the fragmentation of tribes and the erosion of traditional governance structures. The forced relocation scattered communities, separating families and weakening the bonds that held tribes together. Tribal leaders, who had once been central to decision-making and maintaining social order, found their authority diminished in the new environment. The introduction of reservations further undermined traditional governance, as the U.S. government imposed new leadership structures that were often at odds with indigenous customs and practices. This disruption of social cohesion had long-lasting effects, contributing to the challenges faced by Native American communities in preserving their cultural identity and autonomy. The trauma of the Trail of Tears has also left a deep imprint on the collective memory of Native American peoples. Oral histories, passed down through generations, speak of the pain, loss, and resilience experienced during the forced march. These stories serve as a reminder of the strength of those who endured the trail, as well as a warning of the consequences of injustice and oppression. The legacy of the Trail of Tears is not only a testament to the resilience of Native American communities, but also a call to action for the broader society to acknowledge and address the historical wrongs inflicted upon indigenous peoples. Efforts toward reconciliation and healing have gained momentum in recent years. Various Native American tribes, along with allies and advocacy groups, have pushed for greater recognition of the injustices faced during the Trail of Tears and the need for reparative measures. Educational programs have been developed to teach younger generations about the true history of the Trail of Tears, emphasizing the importance of empathy, understanding, and respect for indigenous cultures. Museums and cultural centers have also played a crucial role in preserving artifacts, documents, and personal stories related to the trail, ensuring that this history is not forgotten. In addition, some tribes have taken steps to reclaim their heritage and lands. Legal battles over land rights and sovereignty have been fought in courts, with varying degrees of success. These efforts represent a broader movement among Native American communities to regain control over their destinies and restore their cultural and spiritual connections to the land. The struggle for sovereignty and recognition continues, as Native American tribes seek justice and the fulfillment of promises made to them by the U.S. government. The Trail of Tears is more than just a historical event. It is a symbol of the resilience and perseverance of indigenous peoples in the face of overwhelming adversity. It serves as a reminder of the costs of expansion and the human toll of manifest destiny. The story of the Trail of Tears, while deeply tragic, also highlights the strength, courage, and enduring spirit of Native American communities. Their ability to survive, adapt, and preserve their culture against all odds is a powerful testament to the unbreakable spirit of indigenous peoples. As the United States continues to grapple with its history, the lessons of the Trail of Tears remain relevant, urging us to seek justice, understanding, and reconciliation for past and present injustices. The journey of the Trail of Tears is not just one of suffering, but also one of cultural survival. Despite the efforts to destroy their way of life, Native American tribes have managed to hold on to their traditions, languages, and customs. Ceremonies, dances, and other cultural practices that were once at risk of being lost have seen a resurgence in recent years, as younger generations embrace their heritage with pride. Language revitalization programs have been particularly important, as many tribes work to teach their native languages to younger members, ensuring that these vital aspects of their identity are not lost. This cultural revival is a testament to the resilience of indigenous communities and their determination to keep their heritage alive. The Trail of Tears also serves as a crucial point of reflection for understanding the broader history of indigenous relations in the United States. It was part of a larger pattern of displacement, marginalization, and assimilation that continued for decades. The policies that led to the Trail of Tears were not isolated, but were part of a systematic effort to remove Native Americans from their lands and integrate them into a society that did not respect their traditions or rights. Understanding this context is essential for recognizing the depth of the injustices faced by Native American communities and the ongoing effects of these policies today. As we reflect on the Trail of Tears, it is important to acknowledge the strength of the communities that survived and continue to thrive today. Their survival is a powerful reminder of the importance of cultural preservation and the resilience of the human spirit. The story of the Trail of Tears is not just about loss. It is about the ability to endure and adapt in the face of unimaginable hardship. It is about the strength of community, the power of memory, and the enduring connection to the land. The lessons of the Trail of Tears are as relevant today as they were in the 19th century, reminding us of the need for empathy, justice, and a commitment to honoring the rights and cultures of all peoples.